I arrived at my son's house at 9:12 on a Saturday morning, holding a grocery bag and wearing an old gray apron. Bianca, my daughter-in-law, opened the door with the smile of someone trying to be polite to a stranger. "Oh, Mrs. Lane, you came early. Perfect. The cleaner canceled last minute, so if you don't mind helping with the kitchen before everyone comes?" I didn't mind. I never do. At my age, I don't raise my voice. I take notes. Inside, everything smelled like lemon polish and expectation. Crystal glasses sparkled under a light too bright for comfort. Bianca's heels clicked against the marble, each step a small reminder of hierarchy. My son, Daniel, walked past carrying flowers. "Mom, you didn't have to come so soon." His tone was soft, guilty. He looked at Bianca, then back at me. "She's just nervous about the family lunch." I smiled. "Don't worry, I'll stay out of the way." That sentence always buys peace for a while. In the kitchen, a younger cousin whispered, "Is she the maid?" Bianca answered without looking up. "Something like that. Something like that." I folded a napkin, set it beside a plate, and felt the words land somewhere deep but steady. The house was big, modern, expensive, but the silence in it was poor. As I wiped the counter, I noticed a silver frame on the shelf, a photo of Bianca's grandfather, the late Mr. Dorian, a man I once called boss. He'd passed 3 months ago, leaving behind a fortune, a will, and a family suddenly very interested in morality clauses. The reading would take place in 30 days at the old Dorian estate. Bianca mentioned it casually over coffee as if it were a social event. "They say the lawyer, Mr. Holmes, is quite strict. Only close relatives are allowed." She looked at me with sugar-coated pity. "But of course, Mrs. Lane, you'll be there as Daniel's guest." "A guest? Not family?" I nodded, pressing the cloth into the table until it creased like a scar. By noon, the table was set. 12 plates, 12 seats. I counted them twice. 13 people were expected. I knew who wouldn't have a chair. When the guests began to arrive, dresses, laughter, perfume, I stepped aside and disappeared into the rhythm of service. Someone asked Bianca, "Who's helping you today?" "She's Daniel's mom," she said, lowering her voice. "But she likes to keep busy. She used to clean offices, I think." I didn't correct her. I simply poured wine, steady-handed, invisible. Because the moment you stop defending your worth, people reveal theirs. Later, when everyone sat to eat, Bianca turned to me. "Mrs. Lane, could you bring the extra plates?" I brought them, placed them gently on the table, and met her eyes only once. She looked away first. I stood in the doorway, apron still on, watching the family laugh over a man's fortune that hadn't even been divided yet. And I thought quietly, as I polished a single fork, "They see a maid. That's fine. But the maid sees everything." Subscribe to our channel. This helps our work reach more people. Sunday at 1, the house smelled like tomatoes and expectation. The dining room shone. 12 plates, 12 napkins folded into obedient swans, 12 thin-stemmed glasses waiting to be filled. I stood in the doorway with a pitcher of water and counted again. 12. 13 voices drifted from the foyer. The math did not lie. The manners would. Bianca's aunt swept in wearing a floral dress that apologized for nothing. "Darling," she cooed to Bianca, "the table is stunning." Then, without lowering her voice, "Is the help staying to eat?" Bianca smiled without showing teeth. "She prefers the kitchen." The aunt turned fully, appraising me like a lamp. "Practical," she concluded. Daniel appeared behind her, tie crooked, apology in his eyes. He leaned close, whispering, "Mom, sit with us, please." Bianca's hand touched his sleeve, light as a leash. "There aren't enough chairs," she said, as if surprised by it herself. "We'll add one later." Later is the cousin of never. I carried bread to the table. The swans of napkin bobbed in the air as people sat. Bianca glided into the head chair. Daniel paused, looked at me again, then took his place beside her. Someone laughed about flights to Tuscany, someone else about brokerage fees. A nephew tugged at his cufflinks like the world might come undone if he let go. When the wine was poured, Bianca lifted her glass. "To family," she said. They drank to a word they used like a brand. I retreated to the kitchen island with a plate Bianca had prepared, to keep me comfortable. A stool, a fork, my seat away from the seating chart. From there, I saw every back, heard every joke travel from tongue to tongue and lose flavor on the way. The chandelier threw careful light on careful people. I ate slowly, tasting more salt than I'd added. Bianca's mother dabbed her lips with linen. 30 days, she said, almost tenderly. Mr. Holmes will make it smooth. A cousin asked, any idea how he divided things? Bianca's smile sharpened. Grandfather trusted me with the house details for years. I'm sure he knew who contributed. Contributed is a glove people put on to hide their fists. Daniel tried to soften the air. Granddad valued kindness. Several forks paused, then resumed. Kindness is inconvenient when the plates are hot. I carried in a bowl of salad. Bianca didn't look at me, but her voice found me anyway. After we finish, could you clear and please don't bring your bag into the main room tomorrow at the estate. Security is thorough. She said thorough the way a door says locked. A young cousin, all elbows, turned toward me. My mother's looking for a weekday cleaner, he announced to the table, brave in the way only the ignorant are. Do you charge hourly? The table hummed with polite discomfort, the kind that protects the speaker instead of the wounded. I tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear and took his empty glass. I charge for my time, I said, and left it there. In the kitchen, I washed a single spoon under water, so hot it erased fingerprints. The window over the sink framed a slice of afternoon. Children on scooters, a dog refusing a leash, a neighbor watering hydrangeas as if gentleness were a duty. I let the spoon cool in my palm until it remembered its shape. Behind me, chairs scraped. Dessert arrived with applause meant for sugar. Bianca's laugh rang true for once. She had something to celebrate, or thought she did. I folded the dish towel into thirds, the way my mother taught me when we had only one and needed it to last. Daniel slipped into the kitchen and set his plate beside the sink. Mom, he said quietly, tomorrow, if anyone says anything, I touched his hand. Don't promise what you can't keep, I said. Keep what you can't promise. He stared at me like he was trying to read small print without his glasses. You'll come on time? He asked. On time, I confirmed. With what you need? I looked at the clock. The second hand circled like a hawk. With exactly what I need. He nodded, unsure of which of us he was reassuring, and went back to the performance of normal. When the coffee cooled and the compliments hardened into habit, I wiped my corner of the counter and stood. The dining room glowed with empty talk and full plates. My stool sat obediently where Bianca had placed it, low, out of the way, a seat that could vanish between one course and the next. I left it pushed in, neat as a lie, and thought very quietly, so that only the glass heard me. They set 12 places and taught me everything I needed to know. Then I turned off the tap, dried my hands, and chose my own chair for tomorrow. Monday morning carried the kind of gray light that doesn't commit to anything. Not rain, not sun, just hesitation. I brewed coffee strong enough to remember things for me. The cup trembled slightly in my hand, not from weakness, but from awareness. Every gesture matters when people have already decided what you are. I opened the small wooden box on my desk. Inside, old receipts, 2 photographs, and 1 envelope with my name written in handwriting I knew by heart, Mr. Dorian's. The same man whose portrait Bianca kept polished like a trophy. He had once said to me, years ago when I still worked in his office, Eliza, when people speak to your uniform instead of your eyes, they've already told you who they are. And that man had seen me, not through me. I unfolded the letter carefully. The ink was brown at the edges, smudged from time. If this reaches you, it means my affairs are now paper instead of breath. I've left instructions with Mr. Holmes. There's an additional document, a codicil, to be revealed if the gathering at the estate fails to honor the decency I once believed my family possessed. You always said silence is a weapon, but so is truth. Use whichever hurts less. Arthur Dorian. I pressed my fingers over his name, feeling both weight and permission. So that was it. The old man's final test. A moral will beneath the legal one. I tucked the letter back into its envelope, slid it into my brown leather folder. Inside that same folder were other quiet witnesses, Bank transfers Arthur had made to support the foundation where I volunteered, receipts he'd asked me to sign in his stead to keep things moving, and a small brass key with the initials AD scratched on its neck. That key, I now realized, was for the desk drawer in his study at the old estate, the one Bianca had forbidden anyone to open until the lawyer arrives. I smiled without smiling. People lock drawers when they know which secrets don't like sunlight. My phone buzzed, a message from Daniel. "Mom, Bianca says dress formally tomorrow. She's stressing. Just be yourself, okay?" Be myself. Which version? The one they dismissed or the one they'd never met? I replied simply, "See you at 10. Then I laid out what I would wear. Dark trousers, clean blouse, no jewelry. The kind of clothes that don't explain themselves. On the nightstand, I placed the folder. Brown leather, worn edges, silent heart. Through the open window, I could hear a neighbor humming, a dog barking, the world continuing without witnesses. I took another sip of coffee and thought of Arthur's last line, "Use whichever hurts less." I didn't yet know which that would be, silence or truth. But I did know this. Tomorrow, when they opened the will, they would see both, written in my handwriting. I leaned back, folded the apron I'd washed the night before, and whispered to no one. They wanted a maid at the table. They'll get one, just not the kind they expect. The Dorian estate woke like an old animal. Creaks, sighs, a throat clearing somewhere inside the walls. I arrived at 9:07, earlier than anyone asked me to be. Morning mist lay low over the hedges. Gravel clicked beneath my shoes, the way a clock clicks when it's tired of being ignored. I carried the same brown folder against my ribs, like a second heart. A housekeeper I didn't know opened the door and looked me up and down with the fast calculation of someone trained to rank guests by their coats. "Family?" she asked. "Something like that," I said. The phrase had learned to hold my shape. The foyer smelled of wax and lavender. Portraits watched. Bianca's voice floated from the back hall, sharp with urgency. Flowers toward the windows, chairs in a circle. No, not that one. The blue ones. She turned and saw me. The smile arrived late. "Mrs. Lane, Mr. Holmes isn't here yet. Feel free to settle in the kitchen." She had a talent for placing people where they couldn't be seen. I didn't settle in the kitchen. The study waited at the end of a dark corridor. I knew it well from my years in Arthur's office downtown. The same order, the same stubborn oak desk. Sun fell through the tall window in a single strip, landing on the dust as if it were verdict. The bottom right drawer was locked. Of course it was. I slid the brass key with AD into the mouth of the lock. It hesitated, then turned with the quiet relief of a confession. Inside, envelopes labeled in Arthur's hand. Charitable transfers, house staff pensions, maintenance discrepancies. Under those, a small box with a red ribbon that had lost the right to be bright. I opened it. A simple gold pen lay inside, heavy for its size. The note beneath read, "For the person who signs the right things." I thought of Bianca's aunt asking if the help would eat. I thought of Daniel whispering promises he couldn't keep. Then I thought of Arthur, who had once brought me tea in a paper cup because the intern forgot. People remember the cups you hand them. They forget the cups you demand. Footsteps, voices, the house gathering itself into a performance. I skimmed the maintenance discrepancies, numbers that refused to add up, invoices doubled, then halved. Beside one line, Arthur had penciled a single word. No, it wasn't anger. It was clarity, the kind that doesn't ask for applause. Back in the drawer, at the very bottom, an envelope with my name again, shorter, newer ink. I didn't open it. Not yet. There's a right audience for certain truths. I locked the drawer, slipped the key back into my pocket, and turned toward the hall. A young cousin rounded the corner and froze, surprised to find me in the room where important people pretend to think. "We're starting soon," he said. "You know where the kitchen is?" "I do," I said, and walked past him into the light. In the foyer, chairs had been arranged in a careful circle that excluded the door. Bianca stood like a host on a stage she believed she owned. "Phone's off," she announced. "This is a family matter." She glanced at me. "Please." Mr. Holmes arrived at 9:59, precise as a blade. He shook hands, accepted a seat, set down a leather case that matched his posture. "Shall we?" he asked. I felt the gold pen in my palm, warm now. I slipped it into my folder and took a chair against the wall instead of the kitchen stool I'd been offered by silence. Bianca opened her mouth to reposition me. Mr. Holmes lifted his eyes first. "Mrs. Lane, you'll want to hear this from where you are." Bianca blinked. The chairs did not move. I folded my hands and let the room decide who it believed it belonged to. And I thought, without heat, locked drawers don't scare me. Rooms do, when people think they're keys. The clock in the hall struck 10. The will began to breathe. "Before we proceed," Bianca said, voice lacquered, "a few house rules, out of respect for grandfather." She held a sheet of paper like a baton. "No recordings. No interruptions. And, to avoid confusion, those not listed as direct beneficiaries will remain in the adjacent room. We'll summarize afterward." The paper did not say my name. The room watched to see if I understood my place. I did, but I don't always stay there. Mr. Holmes adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Dorian," he said to Bianca, "Mr. Arthur's will specifies that all invited parties are to remain present for the full reading." He tapped a clause with his finger. The page made a sound like a small door opening. Bianca's mouth shaped surprise, then hospitality. "Of course," she said too quickly. "I only meant comfort. Comfort is the word people use when they want your silence to feel polite." Chairs scraped. Daniel gave me the briefest nod, gratitude dressed as accident. I sat where I had chosen, wall at my back, the window casting a square of light across my shoes. Mr. Holmes began. Bequests named and measured. A cottage to a cousin who actually visited. Funds for scholarships. Provisions for long-serving staff with dates and amounts that remembered birthdays better than the family did. You could tell who felt seen by the way their hands trembled, or didn't, when their names were spoken. Bianca leaned forward at the mention of the main house, the trusts, the art. Her fingers hovered over invisible keys. "As previously discussed," Holmes said, "the principal residence remains with the family under standard conditions." Relief softened her posture into triumph. Then Holmes turned a page. "There is also," he continued, "a codicil." The word cut the air neatly. Some pretended not to know it. Others knew and wished they didn't. Bianca's smile didn't move, but something behind it did. "A codicil?" she said lightly. "I wasn't aware." Holmes nodded. "Filed 6 weeks before Mr. Dorian's passing. It concerns conduct and stewardship. The testator was particular." He opened a second envelope with the care of a surgeon. "It stipulates that beneficiaries must demonstrate respect for those who serve in this household and in the family businesses, documented by testimony or record, prior to final distribution. Failures of conduct trigger temporary reallocation into a charitable trust managed by an executor named in the codicil." Murmurs rose like steam. Bianca's aunt whispered, "Ridiculous." Someone else hissed, "Performative." The chandelier did not take sides. Bianca smoothed her dress. "And who," she asked, "is this executor?" Holmes removed a single page and read without ceremony. "Executor of the codicil, Eliza Lane." Silence. Not the polite kind, the kind that lands and stays. Daniel's chair made a small sound that might have been pride escaping. Bianca laughed, one note, brittle. "This must be a mistake. She cleaned my grandfather's offices." "Yes," Holmes said, not unkindly. "And he trusted the person who cleaned to notice what the polished refused to admit." He looked up at me. "Mrs. Lane, do you acknowledge the appointment?" I set my folder on my lap and opened it, slow enough for the room to hear the leather breathe. The gold pen lay against the edge like a promise. I didn't reach for it yet. I lifted instead the letter Arthur wrote in the handwriting time could not teach and set it on the table for Holmes to see. "I do," I said. Bianca shifted her chair half an inch closer to authority. "We will, of course, need proof of any alleged disrespect." Her smile showed the teeth this time. "I wouldn't want a misinterpretation to cost anyone what they've rightfully earned." "Of course," I replied, meeting her eyes the way light meets glass. Proof is my favorite language. Holmes cleared his throat. We will hear statements and review records. If there are concerns, they can be addressed now. I slid the second envelope, maintenance discrepancies, toward his case, just enough for him to see the label. I kept my fingers on it a heartbeat longer, then let go. From the hallway, a phone vibrated against wood, insistent. No one claimed it. Bianca folded her house rules and tucked them beneath her palm like a losing ticket. Very well, she said. Let's be efficient. Holmes nodded. Then let's begin with testimony. He turned to me. Mrs. Lane, as executor, you may call the first. I glanced at the doorway to the kitchen, where the housekeeper stood with a dish towel clenched but clean. She had eyes like someone who had watched money try to talk. I lifted my chin, an invitation, and she took one step forward. Before we hear her, I said softly, so even the walls would listen. There's one more drawer we should open. The next morning smelled of lavender and damage control. Bianca called before breakfast. Her voice came wrapped in silk and static. Mrs. Lane, I think we started off stiffly yesterday. Maybe we could talk? Just the two of us. The invitation sounded like a bandage offered by the person who made the cut. I agreed. People tell the truth when they think they're fixing something. She chose the sunroom of the estate, light everywhere, no corners for shadows. 2 porcelain cups waited on the table, already poured. She gestured toward the chair across from her. Sugar's in the bowl. I tasted first. Unsweetened. Of course. Bianca smiled, as if we were equals performing equality. I hope there's no resentment. Grandfather always admired your loyalty. I do too, really. Loyalty. A word that employers use when gratitude would cost them something. I'm glad to hear that, I said. She leaned in, elbows on the table, voice lowering. Look, about that executor thing. Mr. Holmes will surely find some clause to reassign it. It's a lot of work for you. Paperwork, travel, unpleasant meetings. I can have our attorney handle everything. She slid an envelope toward me, pale blue with a gold seal. A token for the trouble, and of course, complete privacy. I didn't touch it. You think I'm afraid of work? Her smile twitched. No, of course not. I just want everyone comfortable. Then don't decide comfort for other people, I said. She sat back, eyes bright with frustration disguised as charm. You misunderstand me. No, I said gently. I finally understand you. I pushed the envelope back across the table. It made a small, definite sound, the kind paper makes when it chooses a side. Her hand hovered, unsure whether to grab or hide it. Do you plan to embarrass this family? Embarrassment, I said, is earned privately before it ever appears in public. For a moment, silence. Outside, the gardener's shears clicked rhythmically, truth keeping time. Bianca stood. You've made your point. Not yet, I said, rising too. You'll know when I have. I left her with the 2 cups, one sweet, one not. The air behind me tasted faintly of metal. That afternoon, Mr. Holmes called to confirm a follow-up meeting. I told him I'd be there, and that I would bring documents proving misuse of estate funds. He didn't ask how I'd found them. Men like Holmes know the difference between curiosity and respect. When I hung up, I looked at the brown folder on the counter. The gold pen rested inside, waiting. Tomorrow would not be about tea. It would be about signatures. And if Bianca wanted sugar, she'd have to stir it herself. By the following evening, the house was louder, hungrier. Gossip moves faster than confession. It had already filled the hallways. Someone had told someone that I was creating complications. Another whispered that I'd always wanted a piece of the money. Let them. Words can't bruise skin that's learned to heal in silence. When I arrived for the follow-up meeting, chairs had been rearranged. My seat, the wall seat, was gone. In its place, a small stool near the door, a message written in furniture. Bianca greeted me brightly. We thought this arrangement more efficient. Holmes will sit here, Daniel there, and you, right here by me. Her tone suggested she'd already rehearsed the optics. Holmes entered, greeted everyone, opened his briefcase. We'll review expenditures related to the trust accounts, he said. Mrs. Lane has submitted questions. He nodded for me to proceed. I opened my folder. Pages, copies, not originals. The real ones waited elsewhere, safe. These invoices show maintenance payments signed by Bianca Dorian for work never completed. Same vendor names, identical handwriting. Mr. Dorian flagged them months before his death. Holmes examined the pages. His brow tightened. Professional, not personal. We'll verify these with the estate accountant. Bianca laughed lightly. Surely a clerical error. I sign dozens of things every week. I'm sure Mrs. Lane misunderstands business protocols. Holmes looked at me. Anything else? Yes, I said. The caretaker's pension account. It was emptied 3 weeks after Mr. Dorian's passing. Bianca's nails tapped the table like rain on tin. Are we seriously entertaining? Daniel cut in. Bye, just let him check. She turned on him, voice sugar-coated rage. You're taking her side now? He looked at the table. Silence fell again, heavier than guilt. Holmes cleared his throat. We'll pause until I verify the documents. I'll need 24 hours. He left with the folder. The room exhaled relief that smelled of fear. Bianca rounded on me once he was gone. You don't know who you're dealing with. I know exactly, I said. A woman terrified of mirrors. She laughed, sharp, but her eyes betrayed calculation. You think you've won? He'll find nothing illegal. You'll look vindictive. People will pity you. I'm not looking for pity, I said. I'm looking for proof. Then you'll fall with it, she spat. You always do. Maybe she was right. The next morning, an email from Holmes arrived. Documents under review, unclear authenticity, proceeding cautiously. The gossip changed direction, now toward me. Forged papers, old woman desperate for relevance. For a day, I let it grow, let it think it was winning. I washed dishes, swept my own kitchen, and listened to the sound of the broom on tile, steady, certain. Falls are easier when you know they're part of the climb. I looked at the empty space beside the phone where the brown folder had been. Gone, not lost. Hidden exactly where Arthur would have hidden it, behind decency, waiting for daylight. And I whispered, for no one to hear. They think I've fallen. Good. I like the view from below. That's where foundations live. Rain found the estate before I did. It stitched the hedges to the ground and made the gravel speak under my shoes. I arrived with no folder in my hands, only an umbrella, and the look of someone who had learned to carry proof where fingers couldn't drop it. Inside, the housekeeper, her name was Mara, I'd learned, handed me a dish towel as if it were a passport. Kitchen window leaks, she said. Always has. She glanced at the hallway. They're in the library with Mr. Holmes. You want tea? It sounded like code. I nodded. While water started its small thunder, Mara leaned on the counter. I knew Mr. Arthur, 20 years, she said. He used to sign Christmas cards for everyone with a pen that squeaked. Hated ballpoints. She smiled, then sobered. He kept an old ledger in the carriage room. Said computers lie faster than paper. Her eyes flicked to my empty hands. You don't need a folder if you've got a memory. Or an ally, I said. She turned the flame low, reached for a tin on the top shelf, and lowered it into my palms. It was weightier than tea should be. Inside lay a cloth-wrapped book, corners soft from use. Found it when the roofmen accidentally moved boxes, she said, using her fingers to quote the accident. Didn't tell no one. Figured if the house was going to have a conscience, it shouldn't live alone. I unwrapped the ledger. Arthur's blocky handwriting marched in lines, dates, amounts, notes that didn't waste adjectives. Beside certain invoices, the same penciled word as before. No. Farther in, I found careful copies of payments to staff pensions, with check numbers that did not match the bank statements Bianca had supplied to Holmes. A second column, in a steadier hand, Mara's, listed who actually received what, with signatures made by people unused to signing anything official. I turned a page and saw the line that stopped the rain in my ears. Caretaker pension, transfer 0618 to Dorian Property Services, LLC, temporary holding per BD. Under it, Arthur's last note on the ledger. Temporary means returned. If not, codicil speaks. How did you... I began. Mara shrugged, small and unceremonious. Keys open more than doors when you're the one who cleans them. She slid a thumb under another flap in the tin and produced a USB drive. Red, ordinary, the kind you could lose in a purse for a year. Camera above the West Hall caught folks coming and going after the funeral. I don't watch people. I watch patterns. This looked like a pattern that would need witnesses. Why give it to me? I asked. She took the kettle off the flame. Because when you walked in here, they called you help like it was an insult. Mr. Arthur never did. He said people who help are the only reason old houses don't fall down. She glanced toward the library where voices swelled. And because I'm tired of quiet being the only side that behaves, I closed the ledger, rewound the cloth, and tucked the drive into the seam of my coat, where lining meets skin. You may be called to speak, I said. Mara nodded. I've polished enough silver to know how to stand under light. Footsteps approached. The library door opened. Bianca's silhouette cut the hallway. She scanned my hands, saw nothing, and permitted herself a smile shaped like a verdict. Ready for your clarification, Mrs. Lane? Ready, I said, slipping the tin back onto the high shelf. Tea can wait. As we walked to the library, Mara murmured without moving her lips, a blessing or a warning. Ledgers don't raise their voices, they raise the floor. I crossed the threshold, thinking of the old man's pen, of lines that refused to bend. And I knew, as the rain stitched harder against the glass, that the house had found its conscience, and it wasn't alone anymore. I reached for the chair I hadn't been offered and sat, quietly placing the ledger on the table. Mr. Holmes adjusted his watch the way some people adjust their spine. We reconvene, he said, to address questions about documentation previously submitted. He looked at me, neutral, not kind. Neutral is kinder than most. Bianca sat angled toward him, away from me. Her dress was the color of confidence. Before we waste more time, she said, my counsel confirms that the copies Mrs. Lane provided yesterday are inconsistent with our records. I request they be stricken from consideration. She smiled toward the cousins, who smiled back as if that could change ink. Holmes turned slightly. Mrs. Lane? I set the ledger on the table and opened it to the page where numbers and conscience met. The room leaned without moving. The paper smelled faintly of camphor and insistence. Have you been through something similar? Tell us your story in the comments below. We read every comment. It's important for us to know we're not alone. Mr. Dorian's personal ledger, I said. Entries in his hand, cross-checked by house staff. It predates the digital summaries and outlives their edits. Bianca laughed politely. A household notebook? We're conducting legal business, not scrapbooking. Holmes took the book. His finger paused on the caretaker transfer line. He did not smile. Mara, he called, surprising himself with the use of her name. Would you step in? The housekeeper entered with her dish towel folded like a flag. She stood in the doorway, chin level, back straight. Holmes asked, Is this your handwriting in the margin? Yes, sir, she said. Mr. Arthur asked me to note when staff signed for payments. He said people forget what you hand them if you don't let them hold it twice. Bianca's jaw set. Mr. Holmes, we cannot elevate a maid's annotations over audited accounts. Holmes didn't answer her. He closed the ledger gently, as if it were a door he would open again soon. Mrs. Lane, anything further? I removed the small USB drive from my coat seam and placed it next to the book. West Hall camera, time-stamped 2 weeks after the funeral. It shows Ms. Dorian and the estate accountant entering the study at 11:23 p.m., leaving at 12:01 a.m. with a banker's box labeled Trusts. File names on the connected computer changed that night. Metadata doesn't like being lied to. Bianca's color brightened and then left. This is outrageous. I was organizing, she said. You know how grief signs late-night boxes? I asked, not unkindly. Daniel's chair made that small sound again, the one he made when something true hurt him before it freed him. He looked at Bianca, searching for the girl he loved beneath the woman she had rehearsed. She looked past him to the portrait of Arthur, as if the paint might lean down and whisper a rescue. Holmes plugged the drive into his laptop. The screen threw pale light across faces trained to be undecipherable at charity dinners. The footage played, the study door, the box, the quiet. No theft drama, no panic, just efficiency without permission. Holmes stopped the video at the frame where Bianca's hand rested on the desk drawer, her profile composed as a statue that has decided to move. He exhaled, a sound like paper accepting ink. "We will sequester the digital records and the accountant's statements," he said. "Until then, distributions are paused under the codicil's conduct clause." A cousin muttered, "This is theater." Another, bolder, said, "It's entrapment." Mara, from the doorway, did not move. Bianca collected herself with professional grace. "So we halt everything because a camera was left on and an old book survived the attic?" "Mr. Holmes, please. My grandfather cared about stewardship, not petty vengeance." "He cared about respect," Holmes replied. "The codicil names it, defines it, and binds me to enforce it." She turned toward me, voice sugar turning to glass. "You will regret this." I met her gaze, calm as clean water. "Regret belongs to the past. We're in the present." Holmes closed the laptop. "Executor," he said to me, "you may proceed with calling witnesses if you believe more context is required." I lifted the ledger again and placed my palm on its cover, a gesture that felt halfway between oath and memory. "One witness now," I said, and then a document Mr. Dorian addressed to me for this moment. The room tightened, the way a shirt tightens when you breathe too much truth at once. Holmes nodded. "Name?" I looked toward the hall, past Mara, to the threshold where a man in a caretaker's jacket waited, hat in his hands, grief in his pockets. "Mr. Alvarez," I called softly. He stepped in, eyes clear, voice steady. "I'll tell it as it happened." And I thought, as the door clicked behind him and the house held its breath, we've stopped pretending to be civilized. Now we'll see who is. Night pressed against the library windows like a witness wanting in. The storm had passed, but thunder still argued with itself in the distance. Inside, only the low hum of Mr. Holmes's laptop and the pulse of people realizing they'd been seen. Mr. Alvarez finished his statement, short, unadorned, full of the kind of detail that only truth remembers. He told how Bianca ordered him to remove a locked drawer from the study, for disposal. He told how he kept the drawer instead, because the late Mr. Dorian had once said, "Never throw away what someone tells you not to look at." And then he placed it on the table, wood dull, handle missing, the faint scent of cedar still breathing through its edges. Holmes examined the drawer. "Do you have the key?" I reached into my pocket and handed him the small brass one with AD scratched on its neck. It fit, of course. The click was quiet, final. Inside lay only a single envelope marked in Arthur's handwriting. "For Eliza, to be opened when the air is honest." Bianca rose halfway from her chair. "That's not official correspondence." Holmes looked up. "Mr. Dorian's instructions are part of the codicil. This qualifies." The air was honest enough. I broke the seal. Inside, Arthur's hand again, firmer than age should have allowed. "Eliza, I imagine they will sit around this table pretending to remember who they were. Remind them. If they ever forget what decency looks like, hold up the mirror they polished with your silence. The estate, in moral terms, belongs to whoever still knows the difference between service and servitude. AD." I read it aloud, softly, but it reached every corner. No dramatics, just the weight of a man's last sentence delivered by the woman they'd tried not to see. When I finished, the house fell into the kind of silence that bends clocks. Bianca spoke first. "You're twisting his words. He was sentimental near the end." Holmes folded the letter. "He was meticulous near the end." He sealed it again, as if protecting oxygen. "This document will be entered into record." Bianca's control cracked. "You can't. This is humiliation." Holmes turned the pen, Arthur's pen, between his fingers. Humiliation is not the executor's duty. Truth is. The cousins looked anywhere but at her. Even Daniel's eyes found refuge on the floor. The chandelier trembled with the weight of unsaid apologies. Holmes gathered the papers. "We'll adjourn until morning. I'll prepare the interim report." He nodded to me. "Mrs. Lane, you've handled this with composure." I smiled faintly. "It's practice, not talent." When everyone left, I stayed. The library, emptied of arrogance, finally looked like a room again. Mara appeared at the doorway. "You all right?" "I am," I said. "Rooms just sound different when the pretending stops." She wiped a corner of the table with her cloth, a small ritual of closure, and whispered, "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," I said. "The light does the talking." And for the first time that night, I saw my own reflection in the window. Not the maid, not the guest, just the woman who waited long enough for silence to take her side. The storm moved farther away, leaving everything cleaner than before. Morning came without mercy, bright, unfiltered, the kind of light that makes lies look tired. The estate stirred with nervous breakfasts and muffled phone calls. Holmes had gone to the city to prepare his report. Bianca had stayed behind to manage optics, her words, not mine. I found her in the kitchen, the same sunroom corner where she'd offered me tea days before. Now she wasn't wearing silk. She was wearing yesterday's anger. "Mrs. Lane," she started, "I don't know what you think you're accomplishing, but you're putting my husband through hell. This was supposed to be peaceful." "Peaceful," I said, rinsing a cup, "is what bullies call it when no one answers back." She slammed a drawer, the kind of gesture that pretends to have meaning. "You don't belong in this story," she hissed. "I didn't write it," I replied, "but I kept the receipts." Her mouth opened, then closed again. "You're using my grandfather's death to finish what he started," I said. "He asked me to make sure decency wasn't buried with him. I'm late, but I'm thorough." She laughed, a sound too sharp to be human. "You really think anyone will care about your moral theatrics? The court will see an old employee, bitter and bored." I dried my hands on a towel. "Then let them. I've been invisible before. It's comfortable." She stepped closer, trying to fill the room with her perfume and certainty. "Do you even understand what's at stake? This house, the trusts, the reputation?" "I understand perfectly," I said. "And you should too, because your reputation is exactly what the codicil measures." She blinked. "What are you talking about?" I set a small brown envelope on the counter between us. "Copies of correspondence between you and the accountant. Messages arranging temporary reallocations. Holmes has the originals. These are for your memory." Her fingers didn't move. Her face did, fast, then frozen. "How did you—" "I cleaned up after you," I said. "It's amazing what truth collects in corners." For a moment, the kitchen filled with the sound of the refrigerator humming, the only machine brave enough to continue. Bianca whispered, "You want revenge." "No," I said. "I want reflection." She looked away, staring at her own reflection in the oven's glass door, pale, rigid, unrecognizable. "When the report comes," I said, "you'll still have a chance to choose dignity over denial. Arthur wanted that much for you." She didn't answer. Her silence was the kind that admits everything. As I left the kitchen, the sun caught the edge of the brown envelope, turning it gold for half a second. I paused in the doorway and said quietly, "You once offered me tea that wasn't sweet. I'm returning the flavor." Then I walked out, apron folded over my arm, the air behind me still carrying the faint smell of honesty, warm, like toast left too long, impossible to forget. At 10 sharp, the library filled like a courtroom that had lost its costumes. Mr. Holmes returned from the city with a case thicker than yesterday and a face that had decided not to be anyone's friend. Bianca stood near the mantel, chin high, pearls lit like small denials. Daniel hovered by a chair he couldn't seem to choose. Holmes placed his case on the table, opened it, and arranged paper the way a surgeon arranges instruments. Quietly, with purpose. "We reconvene under the codicil," he said, "to review findings." He began with what could not be argued: authentication of Arthur's ledger by handwriting analysis, chain of custody for the USB, server logs from the estate network confirming files renamed and accessed after hours, bank statements from Dorian Property Services, LLC, showing a transfer out of the caretaker pension and none back in. He didn't raise his voice. Evidence doesn't need volume when it has spine. Bianca's attorney, summoned overnight and already sweating, objected to the informality of household records. Holmes tapped the codicil. "The testator appointed his measures of stewardship," he said. "We honor the language he chose. He turned to me. Executor, your recommendation under the conduct clause? I stood. The room tightened, then held. Restitution of the pension funds within 7 days, I said. Temporary reallocation of Ms. Dorian's distributions into the Scholarship and Staff Trust for a period of 36 months. Removal of signatory authority from estate accounts pending audit. And I let the air settle. A written acknowledgement of harm to be read to the household staff before close of week. A cousin hissed. Bianca's aunt muttered, humiliating. Holmes didn't look up. The codicil authorizes such conditions, he said. Bianca stepped forward. This is grotesque theater. Grandfather would never have wished me publicly shamed by someone who mopped his floors. Mara, at the doorway, didn't move. Neither did Mr. Alvarez. Their stillness said more than my words could. Holmes folded his hands. Mrs. Dorian, this process measures conduct, not pedigree. The ledger is clear. The transfer is clear. The late Mr. Dorian's intentions are unmistakable. He paused. You may accept the conditions and proceed to distribution after the term or contest in court, in which case all distributions freeze and the codicil's charitable provisions activate immediately. Daniel finally found his voice. Bye. Give it back, he said. Make it right. She looked at him as if he'd switched languages. You'd side with her over your wife? I'm siding with the person Granddad trusted most, he said, surprising himself. He glanced at me, not for permission, but for steadiness. He found it. Bianca's attorney bent his head toward her shoulder, whispering strategy that smelled like delay. She straightened, anger ironing her posture smooth. I will replace the funds, she said through teeth that tried to be kind. Under protest. Holmes nodded once. The acknowledgement? I will not abase myself before staff, she snapped. Holmes reopened the codicil, found the sentence he wanted, and read it the way Dawn reads a room. If those who have benefited cannot speak respectfully to those who have kept the house standing, they shall speak respectfully before them until they learn how. Laughter did not come. Relief did. Not because anyone wanted Bianca shamed, but because the house had remembered its rules. Holmes set a folder aside. Then we proceed. Ms. Dorian, you will sign the restitution directive now. Mr. B. Alvarez, your pension will be restored first. Bianca approached the table. I placed Arthur's gold pen where her hand would have to use it. She hesitated, then took it. The nib kissed paper. A signature became a sentence that could not be unsaid. When it was done, she pushed the pen toward me as if it burned. Is this enough for your reflection? She asked. It's a beginning, I said. Holmes closed the folder. We reconvene Friday for the acknowledgement, then announce distributions under the revised schedule. He stood. Until then, the estate is under the executor's interim management on operational matters. The room released a breath it had been holding for years. Someone cried softly. Someone else whispered thank you to no one in particular. As people filed out, Daniel passed me and stopped. Mom, he said, eyes wet and clear. I don't know how to be in both rooms at once. You don't, I said. You choose the one with the truth in it. He nodded, as if that hurt less than he expected. When the library emptied, I stayed by the table with the pen. Outside, the hedges restitched themselves after days of rain. Inside, the house finally had gravity again. I picked up the pen and thought, he wanted them to remember who they were. Today, the remembering began. And then, because the day wasn't finished with me, I heard Bianca in the hall, dialing a phone that would not save her from Friday. Tomorrow we would measure loss. Today, we measured consequence. Friday arrived dressed as ceremony and walked out as inventory. Holmes returned with documents crisp enough to cut, audit updates, confirmations from the bank, a letter from the foundation board requesting Bianca's temporary resignation until the matter resolved. Reputation moves fastest when it's afraid of mirrors. We gathered in the great hall this time, under portraits that had outlived every fashion but posture. Staff stood along one wall, aprons starched, backs straight. Family took the chairs. I stood in the seam between them, where I've lived most of my life. Holmes read the interim order. Effective immediately. Ms. Dorian's discretionary distributions are suspended for 36 months and redirected to the Dorian Scholarship and Staff Trust, with reporting to the executor. Signatory authority on estate accounts is revoked for Ms. Dorian and reassigned to the executor and counsel pending final audit. Dorian Property Services, LLC, is to return the caretaker funds within 7 days or face civil recovery. Each sentence was a floorboard that no longer creaked. Bianca's phone buzzed in her hand. She silenced it without looking, then looked at me instead. If eyes could bargain, hers would have offered countries. I had none to sell. Holmes folded the order. We will now proceed to the acknowledgement required by the codicil. He didn't gloat. Good men don't when they win by doing their jobs. Bianca stood at the front of the room facing the people she'd learned to step past. She held a paper she hadn't written. The words were plain, the way truth is when it's tired of costumes. Her voice trembled on the first line and tried to steady. To the staff who have kept this house standing, she read, I failed to honor you. I used access without accountability. I am returning what I took. I will not ask for your forgiveness, but I will behave as if I've earned it, until maybe one day I do. A murmur crossed the room, not applause and not condemnation. Something like weather changing. She reached the end. The silence after was heavier than the sentence before. Mara folded her dish towel once and set it down, her version of amen. Holmes moved on to operations. Executor, please collect keys to restricted rooms, safes, and accounts. He didn't need to specify from whom. The room turned as one toward Bianca. She unclipped a ring from her bag and placed it in my hand. Metal kissed skin. Keys tell the truth about who has been believed. Then the losses began to count themselves. A trustee seat vacated. A gala chairmanship postponed. A contractor text that read, We'll need to revisit our agreement, once the trust payments paused. Consequence rarely arrives alone. It brings friends. Daniel stood beside Bianca, one hand hovering at her elbow, the other in his pocket like he was bracing a wall that belonged to no house. He looked at me, pleading without words for a version of mercy that didn't lie. Mercy isn't absence of consequence, I said quietly when we were close enough to hear only each other. It's consequence shaped so someone can still walk. He nodded, jaw tight. Will she? That depends on whether she learns to look people in the eye, I said, glancing toward the staff, not past them. When it was done, the staff returned to their work with the dignity they'd brought with them. The family dispersed into side rooms to perform their versions of coping. Holmes packed his case slower than usual, as if speed might disrespect the day. Bianca remained in the hall alone for a moment that lasted much longer than a moment. Then she turned to leave and stopped, because Mr. Alvarez stepped forward and held out a folded paper. A receipt, the pension deposit confirmation, already printed by the bank. It arrived, he said simply. She took it as if it weighed a pound. Thank you, she whispered, not sure who she was thanking. You're welcome, he said. Decency is cheaper than interest. She nodded once, and for the first time that week, her eyes met mine without reaching for purchase. She looked very human, which is to say, very breakable and very possible. I didn't gloat. I don't know how, and even if I did, it would taste like dust. Holmes closed his case. We are adjourned until final audit, he said. People began to move again. The house breathed differently, shallower perhaps, but honest. I stood under Arthur's portrait and felt the weight of the keys in my palm. They were cold now, but they would warm. The fall had happened, and I hadn't needed to touch her. Gravity and a ledger had done the work, and somewhere in the quiet that followed, a clock decided to tick the way it should. 3 weeks later, the house was a softer sound. No shouting phones, no hurried heels. Even the air moved slower, as if it too had decided to live by gentler rules. Bianca and Daniel had moved to the cottage on the east side, what used to be the caretaker's home. Temporary, she'd said. The word still tasted like denial. Mr. Holmes came for final signatures. Everything reconciled, he said, tapping the papers. Funds restored, audit closed, the trust grows again. He smiled a small smile that accountants allow themselves when numbers match the morale. Arthur would be content. he added. I hope he's quieter, I said. He's earned it. When he left, I walked through each room the way you walk through a memory you're finally strong enough to revisit. In the study, the drawer sat in its rightful place. In the kitchen, Mara polished the silver that had survived 3 generations of fingerprints. Mr. Alvarez was teaching his grandson to mend a hinge in the back hallway. Everyone had gone back to work, not because they had to, but because purpose is how some people pray. I found Daniel in the garden, sleeves rolled, hands full of soil. She's trying, he said without turning. Bianca. She started helping with the foundation accounts again, volunteers actually, no salary. That's good, I said. Work cleans what apology can't. He looked up, eyes red from effort, not tears. She asked if you'd ever speak to her. I already have, I said. Words are just louder than she's used to hearing. He nodded, half smiling. You'll stay? Keep overseeing things? For a while, I said. The trust needs order, and the house needs less noise. Then I'll go. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of turned earth and early magnolia. Arthur had once said magnolias were stubborn, blooming, whether people deserved the beauty or not. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table and unfolded the last of his letters. Only one line this time. When decency returns to a house, leave the door unlocked. I understood. Power isn't in possession. It's in what you're willing to release. So I wrote my own letter to Holmes, formally resigning as executor after the next quarter. I listed everything balanced, every receipt accounted for, every promise finally signed. Then I took the old brass key, the one marked AD, and hung it on a small nail beside the pantry door. The metal caught the afternoon light, steady and honest. Mara looked up from the counter. You're leaving it here? Yes, I said. Some things guard themselves. And for the first time, the silence in that house wasn't heavy. It was earned. I left before sunrise, the kind of hour that still belongs to cleaning ladies and secrets. My suitcase was small. Most of what mattered stayed behind in drawers and ledgers. The gravel sang under my shoes one last time. The house stood in the half-light, windows glinting like eyes that had finally learned to see. Mara waited by the gate, hands in her apron. You sure you won't have breakfast first? Already did, I said. A sip of peace. She smiled the way only women who've seen too much can smile, without moving the rest of their faces. He'd be proud, you know. He always liked a good ending, I said. As I turned toward the road, I heard footsteps behind me. Daniel. He held something in his hand. A photograph. Arthur at his desk, me in the background, laughing at something no one remembered. I found this in the drawer, he said. Thought you should have it. I looked at the picture and saw more than faces, saw proof that dignity can share space with grief. Keep it, I said. You'll need to remember what honesty looks like when it's not fashionable. He nodded. Thank you. For everything. I didn't do it for gratitude, I said. I did it because someone had to remember the difference between cleaning a house and keeping it standing. The morning bus came into view, wheels whispering against wet asphalt. I stepped up, turned once more toward the estate. The brass key beside the pantry would catch the sun soon. Someone new would see it and wonder whose it was. Maybe they'd think it belonged to a maid. Maybe they'd be right. As the bus rolled forward, I let my hand rest on the window, watching the house shrink into a shape memory could manage. Behind me, someone coughed. In front of me, a child laughed. Life balanced again. I closed my eyes and whispered what I never got to tell Arthur. The air is honest now. Then softer still, for myself. They let me be small. I left them something large. And when the road curved east, the sun rose over everything we had repaired without saying the word, forgiveness. Because some restorations don't need names, just proof. I let them think I was the maid. In the end, I was, just not the kind they expected. If this story gave you strength, help us by sharing, liking, and hitting the notification bell. We'd love to hear in the comments which part of the story you liked most. See you tomorrow.